welcome back. We're looking forward, B'ez Hashem, to continue on page 260. We're holding in the center of the page, Ki V'hei Maitis Apeh. Pretty much in the middle of the page, the line begins with V'ruach Piv Kol Tzvam. Again, this is the original text on page 260. And these Hei Maitis Apeh come from the Hei Gvuras the Nukva. Before we give even the introduction, which we pledged to do, so at every one of these classes on Perek Chaf of Igeres HaKodesh, we need not really to do so just by reading these words. The Hei Maitis Apeh come from the Hei Gvuras the Nukva. It should be crystal clear, right, to everybody. Not exactly. So it just brings us in without the need to underscore that much the introduction, but it should be said, like we pledged to say in the beginning of every one of these classes, on this particular epistle, Chaf, V'geres HaKodesh. It's hard, it's complex, it's detailed, it is nuanced. As you've noticed, if you're following the class up till now, even at least this Perek, this Igeres, but it should be said because, as we mentioned last week and the week before, that we know we appreciate the essentiality of learning Tanya, living Tanya, identifying with Tanya, as we spoke about this so many times, and we're clear to say this is the perfect manual to our Avodas Hashem. We spoke about this. Well, what does this mean? Why are we comparing it to this? Why are you saying this? I mean, a manual, I understand it. It needs a manual. The Neshama is dropped into this world, ostensibly. So it seems it just dropped into this world. And Neshama beguf. Neshama is a chelik l'kamimal. Part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The guf is, the guf, the body, bodily desires. Bodily lusts, bodily covets, and the Bahamis is the real deal, which we constantly have to deal with. Animalistic it is, animalistic desires, animalistic inclinations, proclivities, and so on. So then the neshama is told that you have to bring getlichkeit, godliness, into this world. But I'm putting into it an animal soul. You're not going to be looking like an angel, and you're not going to. You're going to have to deal with matters of Elam Haza on a daily basis, for that matter, and you have to be megala. You have to do the unthinkable, if you will, the extraordinary, to megala l'kus ba'elam emes Hashem la'elam, and ultimately transform, deal with the Nefesh Bahamis, not to separate yourself from the Nefesh Bahamis of the Guf, and deal with it, to transform it, like the Mishnah says, V'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. The Alter Rebbe has actually in Teira, a famous expression like b'chol levavcha, the Yetzer Hara he's the guy, which is the troublemaker. You have the ability. This is what davening is all about. They just give us the ability that we could deal with it and explain the Nefesh Bahamis, the Tuv Tam of Elokus, the Tam Uru'u Kitei Hashem, the Nefesh Bahamis itself should appreciate. Tuv Tam means the great taste, the great flavor, if you will, which exists inherently in anything which is Kaddish, Toyer, holy, pure, and so on. And the Nefesh Bahamis eventually can turn around, at least for the time of davening, but which has an impact, of course, on the entire day. That it should be able to align itself or stay aligned with HaKadosh Baruch Hu throughout the entire day in Ma'aseh and Dibur, Machshav, action, speech, and thought. But at the time of davening, it could really be a real convicting, a transformation. There's conviction rather than in the Nefesh Bahamis of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent that not only it agrees, it identifies, okay, Nefesh Elokis, I'm not pulling you into any trouble, you continue to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this time of davening. No, much more than that. B'chol levavcha, the Yetzer Hara could come around and love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only identify with, but actual love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is, of course, tremendous. That is extraordinary. And then the guf comes along. Bal korchoch yanamin, famous expression of the Alter Rebbe in Perik Lamed Hey in Tanya. Lukutei Amorim, the first segment. We'll get to it in a moment, just to point this out, which we do every single week. So this is it's a extraordinary avodah. So we need for some to have the ability to transform the Nefesh Bahamnis one way or another. I mean, but Tzaddik is completely transformed. By the Beitani, it's different. Again, this is all the Lukutei Amorim, which we learned and chewed over time and again. The message of the Alter Rebbe in writing the Sefer Shal Beinanim, the significant majority of the world, is the approach Eileho Kolo Namimshach, at the default pull of every Yid, where he's meant to go is to be the Beinani. When his Alter Rebbe explains what the Beinani is, but at the end of the day, it does have an impact, one way or another, not like the Tzaddik, but it has an impact on the Guf and the Nefesh Bahamnis, and Chelkei Ba'olam, and his lot in his or her lot in this world, and ultimately transforming the entire world for Nabod, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is part of the master plan. Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dwelling place in this very physical world. So it's a complex task, and every complex device, as an example, needs a manual which explains all details how to bring that device to its ultimate expression, if you will. Ultimate fruition, ultimate production, ultimate contribution to whatever this device is meant to contribute to in the area that it's there for, to help, to assist, and so on, whatever the device is all about. You need a manual, a good, healthy manual to tell us how to work this whole program. And if it's a larger program, you need a more sophisticated manual, understandably so. So this is, when we speak about the Tanya, of course, for something so complex and so demanding, we need an important manual. And Tanya is the manual. It's the perfect manual to Avodas Hashem. So we learn Tanya, and someone say, okay, let's learn Tanya, let's join Tanya Online, let's say. Wherever you're learning Tanya, let's say Tanya Online, come, and then Igros HaKodesh, Hey Meitzes HaPeh, Hey Gvur is the Nukva. Oh, I know exactly what to do. And how do I deal with the Nefesh Bahamnis? Well, eventually, if you learn even this chapter well enough, it'll contribute to your Avodas Hashem and dealing with that Nefesh Bahamnis. Understandably so. However, this is not, we say Tanya refers to Lukutei Amorim, Shaykh V'Emunah. This is also, at the end of the day, part of Tanya. Tanya has 5 segments. Igeres HaKodesh is the 4th. Then comes the Kunter Sachin. We mentioned so many times, this Teresh Miksav of Teresh Achsidus. There is precision in the number 5 over here. But we say Tanya, it's predominantly, we say Tanya is Lukutei Amorim. This is really where the manual, the actual manual, Shaykh V'Emunah contributes so much to something very important in our mandate to appreciating the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Igeres HaTshuva is identifying with the ability which Hashem gave as the greatest gift, categorically, to the world, to His creation, on all levels, particularly the Yid, that they have the ability to realign themselves with Hashem, which is the idea of tshuva, return to Hashem. So also that we have to know, what does it mean and how does it work, especially something so delicate and something so grand and so deep, so profound. Igeres HaTshuva, that is. Igeres HaKodesh, letters are different, the different epistles and different, dealing with different matters. First of all, it's not sequential like the previous segments. We did have a whole presentation of Igeres HaKodesh, what exactly, this is the 4th segment. Again, we're privileged to learn all the way up till 20. In this 4th segment of Igeres HaKodesh, we did have in 10, which is 10 back, we had a whole presentation. There's a backdrop to Igeres HaKodesh independently. It's good to understand and appreciate that, and gives a lot of perspective to the whole study, the whole what Igeres HaKodesh, about this whole segment. So it's in the beginning of Yud. Where to find Yud, and back to what we were saying before also about the different studies or different segments that we merited to conclude. Wherever you're watching or when you're learning Tanya, of course, you learn Tanya enough, you know where to look when you want to delve into a concept. An average person learns Tanya enough, he knows, there's so much spoken about it, you have to understand. It's Perik Lamed Vav in Tanya, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. This is the fundamental, speaks about this fundamental matter of Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu, this like Hashem wanted a dwelling place in this very physical world. Well, Alter has it before Lamed Zayin. I mean, many places, but where does he deal with this? We know that you want to expand on that concept. It's Lamed Vav in the Kutei Amorim, the first segment. The topics we speak about over here is a lot in Shaykh and Mamunah as an example. So we mention even in this class, wherever you're watching it, but there's an advantage of the original website. TanyaOnline.com, one word, Tanya Online, that is one word.com, right? Tanya Online, one word.com. You have all the previous classes lined up in a separate scroll bar on the left side of the screen. We have the ability to access all the previous classes from the very beginning of Likutei Amorim. So we do mention at times, Alter Rebbe himself cross-references, so it's easy to access. This is what Alter Rebbe is pointing to, and we can say L'Habdil, but we do that as well when we come across an idea which is explained elaborately in other chapters in Likutei Amorim or Shaykh B'Mono or Gerza Treva or in Gerza Kodesh even. Mentioned many times of the Alter Rebbe expanding on the midas of Bnei Adam, or ultimately the midas of the Nefshali Keys, the Chacham and Bina Das and Nefshali Keys. Yeah, he has it throughout Likutei Amorim. He speaks about this in the very beginning of Likutei Amorim, famously in Perek Gimel, the third chapter. But he never elaborates that much and with that much detail in the entire Likutei Amorim, like he does in Igeres HaKodesh, the fourth segment, famous 15th chapter, the fourth segment of Tanya. You can take a look again, click away. Today everything's a click away. You don't have to, it doesn't take time. So we mention it with, again, the advantage of the original website, TanyaOnline.com. Has other we speak about, Tanya has other certain advantages, and of course always to recognize the name carrier of this class, Arutz Shaba English, Israel National News, many years, Kol Achai, thank you. Again, we always recognize it and acknowledge. And this is to put it up basically on a weekly basis, and always have to be to identify and acknowledge everyone's effort, and ultimately all in it together to spread Teiras Achsidus, which is essential, nothing less than essential, to learn, to study, to identify with, to become a mensch in our Avodas Hashem. Not necessarily a Moshe Rabbeinu. It would be nice. We could appreciate a little bit. Actually, from Hillel Chassidus, we see how far when we think about a Moshe Rabbeinu, any real tzaddik, what that means. That it's not like a tzaddik. He's just one step around over the average person. We realize we can appreciate a little bit what we don't know about a tzaddik. However, it's not within, nonetheless, it speaks about certain levels of tzaddikim in Tanya, even though it's predominantly Sefer Shalbeinim. However, it's not a matter of becoming a Moshe Rabbeinu or his great. It just means identifying with oneself and their divine and sacred mandate, Alei Adam, is in this world. So we were speaking about last week. Let's try, so again, even last week when we spoke about the idea of Malchus, the multiplicity which is associated with Malchus, you just see it's really a quick way. It's today would be the second to the last class on top of the row of classes on the left side of the site. So what we spoke about, we did mention. I'm going to say this again also. So this is throughout. We're going to hopefully we'll give this introduction, not necessarily the whole introduction, but to identify that this is not a regular chapter. This is complex. This is Perek Chof. It's a long ride. It's a long ride because it's a long Perek. It's a long Igeres, that is. There's something similar, but we do mention it throughout the entire Sefer. Something similar in Kunter Sacher in the final segment, but generally, in comparison, it's extremely, these two chapters are distinct in comparison to the entire Sefer Tanya Kadisha. So we did say again, we're going to give this introduction to know that, but nonetheless, we're learning something which is important, not important for sure, but something which it's exciting in the end of the day when we do understand what we're talking about over here. It's exciting, and You learn it time and again, and this is, in the end of the day, part of Chassidus Chabad. Chabad is Chabad. It's part of Tanya, which is Chassidus Chabad, to be able to make good on it with our intellectual faculties, to appreciate it, to absorb it. Is it difficult? Yes. We're trying. Abishta gives the bracha. We're trying to explain as much as we can. But when we do understand it, there's so much. It is exciting. It's exciting material which brings excitement, because this is inner concept which the Alter Rebbe explains. In the end of the day, the Alter Rebbe Chassidus Chabad in his inimitable fashion and manner unique to the Alter Rebbe, to explain the most loftiest and deepest concepts of Tedas HaKabbalah to the average human mind. So we're learning it. It is exciting on its own, but we still give the introduction that this is a unique chapter and a difficult chapter. So we learned last week, multiplicity comes from Malchus. That's where the Isis come from. You got to take a look. Last week in previous class, you see. If you're following, you see the flow over here. So today begins, and again, even the end. It's not fair to take the time of the present class if it's really a quick way to see again the whole idea of multiplicity is associated with Malchus. And today we're all the So these 5 instruments of the mouth, we call them instruments because that's the way the sound, the way we know it and hear it, comes out, which is the throat, the gums, the lips, the tongue, and the teeth. These are the 5 instruments through which the actual words come out. And this is associated with Malchus, like we learned last week. Malchus is Peh. Again, you got to see last week's class. So they come from Hegvur is the Nukva. There's no one to be Hichsad. We're not going to go into the whole idea over here. It is a Kabbalistic idea. The Hichsadim, Hegvur is explained in Alter Rebbe, but it's longer. But the idea is to at least appreciate it. There's the Hey Gvuris, so this corresponds to the Hey Maitis HaPeh. So the Hey Gvuris of Nukva. Gvura is about which one of the differences of Hey Gvuris in Chsadim? Chsadim is Mayim. Gvura is Eish. Again, we explained this so many times in the past. Mayim is Yerid Mimayla Lamata, which is Chesed. Gvura is Mimata Lamayla, similar to Eish. Eish also has an idea, divides. Water connects. Eish divides, separates in different ways. Even, put up a kettle of water and come back after it's cooked, you'll see that there's sediments which you didn't even notice before. That's what fire does. It dissects, it separates. So when you have the Nefesh HaAdam, which is Isis, details and particular letters and expression in that an overwhelming Nefesh, the Nefesh is a Kayach Bli Gvuli, but again in context, of course. And then it's broken down to actually words that you can decode, you can understand, and the whole idea of division, Chav Beis Isis, and the Nefesh of the person. How does that happen? Answer, Hey Gvuris. Gvuris is this which divides, similar to Eish. This is the Hey Gvuris of Malchus. Hey Gvuris the Nukva, which is Nukva is Malchus. We know that the generally, again spoken about many times, there's Za, which is Ze'er Abin, also it's called the Tchar V'Nukva, which is the masculine energy and the feminine energy. Zo is Midas, Mashpia, Malchus is Mekabel. So Malchus is Peh. It again, Mekabel from the Midas, and it expresses, it brings out to the outward. That's the idea of the Nikeva. It's the idea that it has the ability to develop, eventually produce. It's a child, and so on and so forth. Again, many, many reasons why Malchus is associated with a feminine energy. So the Hey Maitzis HaPeh come from the Hey Gvuris, which have the ability to divide. And again, Hey and Hey, 5 and 5, because there's a division where it comes through the teeth, division of the letter. In other words, it breaks it apart, which eventually produce that particular letter, which you meant to mean that you need all 5, even though it says it's generally divided. It says that for the Aleph base, there's an average about 6 letters coming from every one of these chords, these instruments as we call them. But in the overall, they are, and therefore there's 5 gvuras which divide in a certain way. because there's division in the ability of certain letters to be expressed with the teeth, and certain ones from the gum, and certain ones from the lips, and so on and so forth. It's famously said, it says exactly, shows you which one. I mean, once you hear it, you could easily identify what would be underscored, or what letter is namely expressed through the tongue, what letter namely expressed through the lips. A bays, you need the two lips come together, right? Mem, bays, as an example. Vav, there's a combination of lips and tongue as an example. So you have the Hey Gvura, the dividing energy of Nukva, which establishes these five instruments, Moitzei Sapeh, which bring these letters to their to their way they are expressed in the context of the Isis coming from the Nefesh. So you have the Nefesh is more Pashut, and then eventually Chabad, and it goes to the Midas, and again, I explained this last week. The person has an emotion, or he emotes with he has a certain sentiment towards another person, because the person, let's say, is poor, so he has compassion, so that causes the person to talk to the other, as an example. The combination of the feeling to the actual words, where the words are makabel from that feeling, but then the feeling is something which there's no isis, there's no letters. That's why feelings are deep, and sometimes when you could feel the other party's feelings, you identify something much deeper than what they express with words. Sometimes the words themselves express something very deep, and it's very indicative how the words are expressed. The emotions come out in the words, but we do appreciate the words are later in the game. This is already taking that emotion and bringing it into thought, into speech, where there's already division of 22 letters. And therefore, really, words cannot really express what's going on in the heart, because the heart is transcendent. It's deeper than words, letters, divisions. That's what Malchus does. The Hey Moitzei Sapeh, bring it into, it breaks it apart. So it's already a step lower, even though, again, there is the fusion many times between both of them. That's why some people, in their words, you can see their entire heart coming, their expression. Nafshe yotze bedabre. Usually, you could hear what the person going in the person's heart. Come in, I empathize with you, I sympathize with you, you're hungry, take this warm meal. Of course, there is the compassion coming out of those words. But the compassion itself is much deeper, because there's no AC, it's not broken apart, there's no gvura yet. The point is yet, there is many times there's the fusion of the two, that the person hears the entire sympathy in those words. And as the words not only express what's going on in the heart, but the words itself carry the energy, that sympathetic energy. Many times, most of the times, you see it's a step further. It's already put into words. Sometimes, for that matter, works the other way around, which is really a bit of the message over here, that words are source that the Rebbe has. We learned this in the seventh. We learned this idea in the sixth of Igeres HaKodesh. I'm sorry, the fifth of Igeres HaKodesh. The fifth of Igeres HaKodesh, the Rebbe points out. Really, the idea of the Koach HaDibur comes from a much deeper place within the Nefesh. To look at what he's saying over here, the Malchus is called Keser because it's sourced in the deepest parts of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, sometimes, when they talk, that itself rouses a deeper level with an emotion. How does that work? Because, again, speech has a very deep level within the Nefesh. So he says over here later, it's Keser Milmata, it's like the crown. Notes, he's going to say this over here, notes Chilas and Seifon. The beginning is edged in the end in the beginning. So as much as sometimes the words limit, the words also reveal. So it says the other way around. When the person's angry, don't talk. Because the words are going to bring out a deeper level of anger. How so? It should minimize the anger, because you're just limiting it to words. No. Words, letters, are mushush in the etzem hanefesh. So again, you have to see that chapter. We learned it for that matter. So only a healthy person, it's not that you have the instruments, you're able to talk. It's a healthy person is able to talk. The instruments just bring it into the which is the combination of the breath, the vocal cord. In other words, the chords which bring it into bring structure, bring it into manners of expression that the other party could hear, could identify, could decode, if you will. But the healthy person is able to it's not somebody who has 5 instruments is able to talk. A mute also has five instruments, as we call them, can't talk. Because letters are mushrish in the Etzem HaNefesh, and again, Malchus has an enormous kayach, enormous shadish. The source of Malchus is even higher than the source of everything, which is even higher than Malchus itself. Again, we just kind of hinting it or intimating of this over here. This is part of the message, because the speech is so sourced in the core of the nefesh, higher than even emotions and Chabad and intellect. Even though on the surface it's the lowest level, but no, it's chilos maseifa. The edge is the beginning is edge, and the end is edge. The beginning there from Malchus is also called Keser Milmata Lamayla. But on the surface, Begoli, of course, Malchus is the lowest level. The idea, the division comes from Gvuris. Hey, Maitzis V'lachay. Oh yeah, Hey, what is the nukva? As we just explained. Now we can understand. He goes on, right? Which is the beginning of the line, and therefore it is called Almadis Galia, revealed world. Why is it revealed? Well, what is revealed in Almadis Galia? And again, this itself we spoke about so many times. Almadis Skasia, the famous two Almadis Skasia and Almadis Galia. I'll tell you about Hazard, even Kutya Morim. Shaykh Bemuno, Igeres HaTshuva, Almond Stilmin and Almond Isgalin, hidden worlds and revealed worlds. Which one's higher, by the way? When I say, the revealed worlds, that's Stilmin, this is which hidden is hidden, so the real deal is the Almond Isgalin, and of course the opposite is true. Because what are they hidden in? They're hidden into the godly reality, so it makes the Almond so much more qualitative. The Almin Disgalia, it's revealed, it's removed away from its source, the Elokusa, therefore it's Begoli, so thus a lower level of Eilam. Eilam Elashon Hela Behester. Now Almin Stim, the Eilam Sheba is not so evident because it's Sasum in what? It's covered over and it's overwhelmed by the reality of Elokus, which it is, still part of one way or another. It's still Almin, but it's Almin Steaming. Almin Disgalia means it removed itself, so Almin Disgalia by definition is a lower level. But here, it's all interconnected, of course, but he says he's Galia because here, in these worlds, something totally new is happening. A Gili, a total new revelation, new manifestation of what? Of the Kayach Abri Yashmiyayin, which again he speaks about so much in the Geras HaKodesh. We're following, this is an important part. It's a crux of actually the message. If you get it, the entire Chaf, actually, the thread of the entire Chaf is the idea of Yashmiyayin, the advantage of Yashmiyayin. As we're going to see, all these pieces are going to come together. But this is the something new. It's Alma Dizgali, something, a new phenomenon, a new idea, total new idea, which is the idea of Yeshmiyayin, which again, it's new. And we speak about, by definition, this is something that's like a new program, which we don't know about. And that's why it could come into an Olam, like we said, from the perspective of Ilav Ha'ol, it'll never be an Olam. What is Ilav Ha'ol? What are we talking about? Yeah, you have to see the previous classes, which we're not going to repeat. It's a click away. There speaks about the two ideas, the Ilav Ha'ol, cause and effect, which the effect always is connected and appreciates the cause. This is the cause to its effect, to its coming into existence. So this again, not even fair to even mention this even briefly. It's the previous classes. There's the connection of the Ilav Ha'ol, which that's normal apparently. You talk about the gradual evolution from the Ilah to the Ol, the Ilah to the Ol, which that Ol becomes the Ilah, that next effect becomes the cause to the next effect, and so on and so forth. This graduality, I don't think there's such a word, I don't believe so, but from the higher, maybe there is, but from the higher to the lower, all of a sudden there's a new idea, there's an Eilam, but of course this Eilam could not come from Ilav Ha'ol, because you're leaving so close to it. And if you're close to the higher level, what you're going to have a creation, you're going to have a world, you're going to have Bria, Neshamis yoshvin, nenin, zivashchina. We're talking about a place which is overwhelmed with Elokus. Place, I mean, it's not a place. It's just the overwhelmingness of Elokus. You can't have this division of Eilam Bri Yitzir Asiya and multiplicity and divisiveness. That doesn't exist. If we just have that, the gradual evolution of the higher level to the lower level within Elokus, you can't have Nivroim Baligvul. The only way Nivroim Baligvul could come about is because of the Bri Yashmiyayin, this new idea of ex nihilo, as we spoke about in the previous chapters, a total new idea. Where do we see it? Through the Isis, which ultimately will produce Eilamis. Eilamis which are on the surface nifradim, just like the difference of Isis in comparison to where the Isis don't exist. They're the Midas, the Chacham Minadas, as an example. So this is why it's called Al Midas Galia, as he explains it over here, because here you see this whole phenomenon of Yesh Me'ayin. And the Yesh Me'ayin comes from a deeper dimension within Elokus, as we mentioned the other day. On the surface, it seems lower. What we just said about Malchus, about Peh, about speech. It's lower. But it runs very deep, or it's sourced and rooted much deeper than the entire other 10 spheres. The idea of B'resh Me'ayin is a similar idea. As we explained, this comes from the deepest parts of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be able to create and ultimately have the production of the Yesh, particularly Yesh HaGashmi, physical Yesh, which was one of the class, I think the class before this present class. And the whole idea to create something in a way that it could appear not the way the truth is. We say not the way truth is, we say, going back to that stone, right? You look at the stone and you say, do you have any source? You don't have any source which is right now giving you chayis? No, I'm a stone the way I am. I'm the way I am. That's the way I was from the very beginning of creation. I don't identify really with somebody who's giving me life right now. That's not the message of the stone, at least. The truth of the matter is, the stone is only there because Hashem is right now Mahava Machai Mekayim, is giving existence the life force into that stone, and the Eibishter would stop for one moment. The stone would disappear, become to nothing, is no thing at all. Completely nothing. As we mentioned, Hashem's energy is not like the battery into a device. Device is a device. It's worthless. It doesn't have any functionless if it doesn't have a battery. So the battery is really on the surface, everything about the device. When you talk about it in context of what it could, you bought the device or you have the device, because it's going to contribute to your excitement one way or another. If it's a music player, whatever it is. But nonetheless, if you pull out the battery, does the device disappear? No, it's still there. It doesn't have any function without that battery. When it comes to Kodesh Baruch Hu, you look at that stone, it's on Hashem, is giving you life, like, puts in the battery, okay, now you can exist one way or another. No. The entire Metzias of the stone is a lakus. It's only because Hashem is right now Mahava Machayim Mekayim, is giving it life and energy. He's pumping every single second, millisecond. So every particle of that stone is only about a lakus. So you would say the stone, look at the stone, it's telling you the entire story. I'm just a manifestation of the godly reality. No, you look at the stone, the message is not really that. And everything else in Elam Hazah is just the opposite. I'm here. Talk about a source. What are you talking about? Here I am. That paradox, that oxymoronic expression which exists in Elam Hazah, is the production of Yesh Me'ayin. A new idea comes to me. And the Eibishter, on one hand, he's creating, on the other hand, he creates it that the Yesh could look like a Yesh without its connection, or its demonstration, its protest and demonstration of its connection to the Ayin. So that's another reason, again, you can see it's ultimately all connected to the simple idea about Midas Galia. It's only this what comes out Begilui in the end of the day, expresses this phenomenon of Yesh Me'ayin, ex nihilo program, if you want to call it. And that's what he says. The ability, that kerch of Ein Sof, which we just said to Yesh Me'ayin, Ilval is natural. Ilval would be the norm, would be the default, if you will. The whole idea to create Nivroim is this new idea. And this new idea is coming from a very deep level within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's only the kerch of Ein Sof, again, as we learned, it's not only the Ein Sof, the highest level, Atzmos and Mohos, can only create Yesh HaGashmi, as we we discovered in the class before this class. You'd see it also lined up. It would be the 6th, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the Gilui of Ba in this, in Olam, and through the Asar Mamoris, through the ACS, Nigla is revealed the Kechayr itself, Yeshmi Ayin, not through the program of Ilav Olu. The Tesvir is Rishayna is from Chochma to Bina to Das to Chesed, Chesed to Gvura to Tiferes, and so on and so forth. How do you say Tiferes? That's how you say Malchus. Because it doesn't yet Megala that Yeshmi Ayin idea. So they are emanated, they come from one or the other in a matter of Ilav. Of course, the Bina appreciates the Chachma. The entire Midah, Seichel Midas, are usually the classic case for Ilav Olu. The whole Midah comes based on how much you appreciate the matter. That's how much that attribute comes into practice, comes into expression. You're driven to something because you intellectually appreciate the Tov which is in it, in every area. And of course, you're talking about Lakus. The Avos Hashem comes from Shema Yisrael. How does the person love HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Because Shema Yisrael, you meditate in Hashem, consequently, you're loving Hashem. So the midas come from Chabad. That's again the classic example of Yovel. But even if you break it down, every one of those midas, because they're the inner energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not where it becomes the establishment of the phenomenon of divisiveness, Isis, multiplicity in Hashem Echad, which is north of Malchus, if you will. Terva has it in Shaykh B'Mun. Anything higher than Malchus is just about it's the whole. It's the expression of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the mamish the Ein Sof. Midos are not the Ein Sof, but nonetheless, they are all the way up there, and they carry that all the way up there. Ambiance, everything about the midos and the Chachma Bina, because they're part of the Achdus Hashem. So, and it's all Malchus where this whole phenomenon begins of divisiveness. Malchus, past, present, future. All to the rights. In Shem Havaya, Echod. That's what Shem Havaya is all about. Malchus, Hashem Melech, or actually it starts Melech, famous. It's asked why it starts present, but not for now, of course. Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech. Oh, Malchus begins the idea of the business of time. Time is a creation. Time doesn't exist prior to Malchus. But really, the clock doesn't tick prior to Malchus. Like, how was the clock ticking before creation? How was the time doing before Hashem created the world? It wasn't doing anything. There was no time. Now, understandably, we're part of the fabric in time and space. We can't imagine. What does it mean there was no world? What does it mean no thing? Was it just like a deserted? No, deserted is a desert. There's a desert, a deserted. There wasn't a desert. There was nothing, is nothing at all. The clock wasn't ticking. No, it wasn't. Time is a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mokim is a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where does it come, at least in its seed, in its original state? Again, Malchus is not about the Eilam Hazan. Malchus is because Malchus Chamalchus Kol Eilamim, the source of Zman and Mokim, time, place, which eventually manifested, and expresses itself in the different levels of Eilam, each one according to its status, of its B'ri, Yitzira, see in the Eilam as Agashma, you see the full expression of the divisiveness, multiplicities, Dafkan Eilam Hazan. But it starts from Malchus, not north of Malchus, not higher. Because that's where Malchus is peh, the Isis, the divisiveness of letters, only come where there's peh, which means the idea of speech. In motion, there's no Isis b'chlal. Isis are produced in Machshava, and namely in Dibur. Because with the level within, there's no Isis. So everything's part of the Echad. And when you talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's about Hashem Echad. The idea is that even Baruch Shem Kir Malchus Ilavad, even though there's Malchus, Malchus called Ulamim, still we draw that Emes Hashem Le'olam and Vahav to elevate and to sublimate and to establish this pull and drive from everything which is created, even from the program of Yeshmi Ayin to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's our mandate. but something totally different on high. That transition from Ila Ba'ol to Yesh Mi'ayin is a novelty completely. And that happens, the difference of the first 10 spheres, which there it's Ila Ba'ol, cause and effect, the connection, the appreciation of one level to the other. Over Erein Tzaf and Mushbachachol Mavada, and the infinite light of Kosh is in Chochma itself. That's what Chochma is. It the first one of the spheres. Kochma, it's connected to higher, to the Kesser, and so on, and it draws that energy, and eventually Bina Das Chesed Gvul, it's hard to say. Ila Ba'ol, then begins Malchus. Malchus is a total different idea. Total different idea, because then begins Isia's multiplicity, the source of multiplicity, and the source of divisibleness. This is Gili, B'riya Yesh Mi'ayin, this new phenomenon of ex nihilo, which is again a paradoxical idea, despite the Eibishter is the only chayas of everything which is created. And every detail, but nonetheless, it does not demonstrate that message as we see it evidently, namely in Elam Haza. Because it's part of the B'riya this Galia, Kibon, Nigla, this Ein Sof, again, it is that was bringing out a virtuous dimension, like again, in alignment, which you said in the previous, again, the sixth class over here, that it comes from a great oyer. It's a very deep program. The ability to create Yesh Mi'ayin, it's so opposite than one could ever appreciate this whole idea of an ex nihilo, because it comes from a deeper level. Actually, he says also nigla in a virtuous manner over here, that kibon nigla, there's something, the Ein Sof, which creates this program of Yesh Mi'ayin, ex nihilo. Where's the first level of its manifestation? Nafkin Malchus. As opposed to the others are Ke'ila Ba'ol. It starts with Chochmi, have Ein Sof. Only, and then eventually it would come across the entire 9 spheres till Malchus, in a way of Ila Ba'ol. Malchus is where the idea of Yesh Mi'ayin begins. It's brought in Kabbalah, different places. At the end is the edge of the beginning, which he's trying to say this Malchus, because of its novelty, as we just said, it's associated with a certain oyer, a great oyer, a lichtigkeit, which is a deep level of light within a Kosh, which you can create, could produce Yesh Mi'ayin. Nobody can do it. No such a thing. Even in what we do, we take the matters of Elam Haza, we change its form. Even something which is sophisticated, very sophisticated machine. Yeah, the machine comes from this material, that material, that material. Where does material come from? Well, every material comes from a different place. You didn't create the device. You comprise the device. You put it together with all the different material that you have. Because Baruch Hu, he didn't have material. It's B'riya Yesh Mi'ayin, ex nihilo, a total different, a new idea comes to be. So that koyach of Malchus, to have the Yesh Mi'ayin as part of its expression, runs very deep on high, like we said, we learned in that class which you just mentioned a few times. That's why no seifon bitchila son, as we said before. Give the example again. The example spoken of many times here is Chassidus. The dibur is connected to a very deep level, and again, Dr. Rebbe has it in gives a kodesh. Hey, speech comes from the healthy person, which has a healthy nefesh, which means it comes from the deepest level within the nefesh. It manifests all the way in the rock bottom. And again, just to repeat this example, someone's angry, they say, don't talk, because the talk will bring out something deeper which you didn't. Or the positive, if someone has a certain idea, concept, you understand it one way or another better before you put it into words. Putting it into words is a whole avodah. It's a serious effort. You have to take this concept, you have to give it over to a disciple, to a pupil, to another party. Put it in words, it limits, it doesn't bring out apparently the depth of the matter that you were able to appreciate when you were behind those closed doors trying to figure out the concept. You got it. You come out, they're asking you, what is it about? Oh, now you have to put it in words. Kind of, it's a degradation. It's a decline of. It's a step down to where you acutely understood this concept. True, yet to a degree. To a degree, that is. Where do we see it? Start talking. Start explaining. Ask any teacher. They'll tell you they understood it and they thought they understood it and they felt the challenge was to put into words and give it over, and then it would diminish the crystalness, the acuity of the vorti of this which they're trying to give over, the purity of this which you're trying to give over, the way it resonated before I needed to put it into words. True to a certain extent, but ask any pedagogue and say, teacher as an example. Give it once you gave it over, and you start talking, you start putting in words, then you understand the matter much clearer. Then even before you put in the words, how does that work? How can that work? You limited it. You put it a concept which is part of your mind, and you put it into words. It was a yerida. It was a descent. It was something that you a decline in its energy by definition. Of course, so. But yet, you'll ask every teacher when they itemize, when they articulate the matter, and the more they do articulate in words and details, at the onset it seems every word is limiting on the beauty of the crystalness of that thought, of that insight. But in the end, when you explain it time and again, or even you explain it to your student or to the other party, then you start understanding it much deeper. And a lot of details come together and open up in front of you. This is what you didn't know before you started talking. That's a paradox. Yes, because Malchus Seifan knows with Chilosim and Chilosim Seifan. And the end is edged in the beginning. The way it is in Dibur, it's so sourced in the Nefesh. So when you start talking, that source, which is even higher than the Chacham and the Das and the Midas, will come and contribute to the whole Esesphiris. And again, we said, give example, talk words of mercy, it arouses more than mercy than even before you spoke. It sounds again paradoxical. Here it's within, here I'm bringing it outwards, already putting it into words. Sure, it's limiting, no, but the words are sourced even higher than the Midas, even higher than the Chacham and the Das. Sourced in the Yetzim Nefesh, and when you talk, the Yetzim Nefesh, how do you say, opens, sheds new light, new expression in the entire system of the 9 spheres, which is Chacham and the Das, the cognitive faculties, and then the emotional faculties, as we see it evidently. In the areas of scholarship, in the areas of emotions. Because you started talking, because you put into words, deeper levels of emotions will come out. That's the idea of no safe, because the end is edge in the beginning the end. And he goes, the Keser, the Keser, as we know, is an intermediary. We spoke about this as well so many times. It's an intermediary between the creator to creation, which we know this is the levels of Keser, famously known as Arich and Atik. It's an intermediary between creator and creation. Netzolim would be Atzilus. So this Malchus, which is the lowest, is of course connected to Keser, because Ein Keser El Melech. The idea of Malchus is right away associated, because but Keser is higher than the entire sense Svidus. What are you connecting it to Malchus, which is lower? No, Ein Keser El Melech. The end is edge in the beginning. As we just showed you, not only this prism over here, or this idea, simple idea of Ein Keser El Melech. You're talking about the crown, something so high, but Melech. Melech is a leader. The Melech is Melech b'mishpat yamid oretz. In other words, he with words he comes and deals with a nation which is separate. As we spoke about this again in last week's class, you can't be a nation on children or on ministers. It's precisely Am Hadras Melech, Am Lashon Aimemos. We point this out. Gecholim Aimes, Aimemais, which are coals which are not struck, which are not lit. That is, rather, which are not lit. The fire is diminished. That's why the Am is called an Am, separated from the direct spirit of the king. It's not the children of the king. It's not the ministers. It's the regular folk, the regular people. That is what ultimately establishes the Melech, and this is what the Melech deals with, for that matter. So it's a Yerid in his personality. A Melech is an exalted person. But there is the connection. He leads And he's the Melech, the exalted personality with the Keser, the crown, which is a symbol of his exaltedness. But he is the Melech to an Am, Ein Melech alol Am. Thus, the connection of Malchus to Keser, which is even higher than the entire 10 spheres. As he goes on to say, Keser is the most important, and it has Achrein of Shalim. So it is so powerful that it has the end, meaning to say, it's the intermediary between Matzil Lenetzalim, the emanator to this, the emanation, creator to Netzal. There's not creation yet because creation begins by Bria, but it's the emanator, the end of the emanator to the beginning of the emanation, So it has the end and final energy of the unadulterated Ein Sof. That's what Keser is all about. As we learned so many times, it's the idea of Keser, it's a crown. About the exaltedness of the king. This is what Keser is all about. So in Elokus would be the end of the Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore it's called Malchus. Keser Malchus. In Keser Elul Melech. You see directly the connection of Keser to Melech. Malchus to Keser. No, it's safe from Betchilasan. So we see evidently by a king. In one end, the king is an exalted personality, which the crown identifies that exaltedness, and yet he's a melech dealing with the most intricate details of his the space of rulership and of his country, people. A melech am, the simple folk, and he's involved, and a true king is involved in every detail of the country that he leads and guides and mentors, and king of with his decrees and edicts, and so he's very much connected to every detail and iota of his own entire establishment. Together with that, he's a Keser, he has a crown, exalted, and of course he is an exalted personality. Exalted from who? From that very Am. He's an elevated person. That is the persona, that is the personality of the king, every part of a king. If we know a little about kings, true kings, we're not talking about tyrants. It's an exalted, not only personality, but everything about them is mereimam. But yet, melech. Ein keser elul melech. Yeah, it's edged. The end and the beginning, the beginning, the end. And again, as we pointed out before in the Nefesh HaAdam, you talk it, everything becomes so much more rich, clear, and transparent in your own mind, as we see it evidently. And again, the way it contributes to the Chokhmah and so to the Midas. You talk with Rachmanis, your Rachmanis went on inside before you brought it to that speech. Of course, there was an important, potent passion unfolding that you put into speech. At the end of the day, that Yerida to Malchus aggrandizes that expression, that emotion of Rachmanis, as we see it evidently. Words Rachmanis or Abba or Guru. Anyway, you see speech has that kayach. Because speech is rooted in the Yetzim HaNefesh. It's no Seifen. B'tchilason is Seifen. Ki Kesel Melech. Then he goes on, maybe we'll do another few lines. And for that matter, that end of Ein Sof, which is the Keser, that's called Malchus of Ein Sof. So you see over here the connection, also from that perspective and point of view, of Malchus to Keser. Just like Malchus, the generic Malchus as we know it is Malchus of Atzilus, is the end of the entire Seder Ishtalshalu, is the end of the Spheres Atzilus, the Eilam. So to the end of the Ein Sof, which is Keser, is also called Malchus the Ein Sof, similar to the end of the Spheres. It's simple. End of Spheres, Malchus. End of the Ein Sof. Again, that's the idea of Keser, the intermediary between Matzal and Etzalim, the transition, creator and emanator to emanation. So that end part of the emanator, that's called Malchus as well. So you see again the connection of Keser and Malchus. No, it's Seifon, Mitchilason v'Seifon. Therefore, therefore, Malchus is also called Keser. As we said before, it contributes to the whole Milo. So Malchus itself becomes a Keser Milmata L'Milo, even though at the end of the day it's the lowest. We'll stop over here. So we'll be holding a Ma, which is 5 lines to the bottom. And the connection, basically what he's saying over here is because in the end of the day, what is the real gili of the deepest levels within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Dafka B'riyas Yesh Miyayin. And eventually he ties it in with the mitzvah, which is done with the Elam Hazeh Gashmi, part of the master plan. He's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these loyas Baruch Dir B'Tachtenim. Who's touched by this Dir B'Tachtenim, that we take the physical in a world which is produced through Malchus? It said, do it exactly like that. The way I wrote to you in Shulchan Aruch. But I'm just putting on film boxes coming from hide of an animal, and really the nitty gritty, the part and parcel of Elam Hazeh, the real deal of Elam Hazeh. So what is it? So why is it? Yeah, I'll do it because you're asking me. But why is this? The etzem, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, derives pleasure when there's a dir b'tachtonim, this which is created through Malchus. That's the mitzvah, and significant majority of the mitzvahs are made with the physical, are all about rather associated with the physicality of Elam Hazeh. The significant majority of mitzvahs, it's true, because the no tchilos of the end is ended in the beginning. So the Nisavakosh Baruch Hu is loy Baruch Hu the etzem dir b'tachtonim in the lowest, because the lowest was created through this Malchus. The Malchus is connected to the Achreina Shebein Sof, and even higher and yet higher. So the whole program of Ex Nihilo B'riyas Yesh Miyayin, which produces all this and establishes all this, is also something which is only in the Chei Kabbalah, in the bosom of the Creator, to create Yesh Mi'ayin, something from nothing, Ex Nihilo. Especially as he says in that class which we mentioned a few times, which is really on the top of the page of 260. Deepest levels of the Kodesh Baruch Hu is which ultimately creates, even though the opposite ostensibly apparently fits more, meaning to say that Malchus would be the lowest. It creates, it's the beginning of the divide and multiplicity away from the default message of Hashem Echad, or energy, or spirit, or environment, or ambience of Hashem Echad, which usually that's the way it's meant to be. Hashem and Hashem Leishanisi and Shema Mitzvah Mali. Everything's Hashem. Everything's really part of the Achdus Hashem, and then multiplicity, divisiveness, the way we see it evidently, and eventually it doesn't appear that it is a manifestation, extension of Hashem. Yeah, it's a deep program of Hashem, which is even deeper than everything else which we could ever imagine. And this note, Seifon Tchilas and Tchilas and Seifon, is all because in Keser El Melech. And in this case, the fact that the Dibur, which created Malchus Chamalchus Kolam, ultimately this world, which this world become a Dir B'Tachtein for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Loi, to the deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is really connected again, the idea of the Etzem connects to Gashmis. The Malchus is connected to the highest level of Keser. The Malchus is what produces Elamas, and Elamas Gashmi, and this is where we do most of the mitzvahs. Or rather, the significant majority of mitzvahs is associated with Elamas Gashmi. And therefore, the connection of this, which Hashem is the determination of HaKadosh Dafka Dafka with Elam Hazeh, matters of Elam Hazeh. It's that tefillin, it's the wool of the animal, the crackers that we eat. Shouldn't even call them, but just to point out this point, on the night of Pesach, the 14th day of Nisan, all the physicality of Elam Hazeh. Yeah, the physical was created from this program Yesh Miyayin, which runs very deep within HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The deepest levels of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, now it's all fitting together.